Those who call this carrier home live by a motto that captures the spirit of America's Navy. It's very simple. The words, "Give them hell." And we do give them. At exactly 4:19 a.m. on November 21, 2025, in the skies above the Caribbean Sea, 3 Venezuelan Su-30 Mk2 fighter jets suddenly dove from an altitude of 2,000 feet, flying at speeds over 480 knots, closing in on the USS George Washington and executing an action unprecedented in the region. Within less than 20 seconds, the ship's combat systems activated interception protocols in response to the strategic threat. Alarmingly, with less than 4 nautical miles separating them from the carrier strike group, the Su-30s maintained their high speed and attack angle, pushing the situation to the brink, where a single command could ignite open conflict, their sole objective to force the U.S. to alter its course, thereby creating a dangerous political precedent in the region. Could America's interception systems neutralize this looming threat? Or was a Caribbean war about to break out? I'll tell you the truth. At 4:19 a.m. on November 21st, 2025, over the skies of the Caribbean Sea, 3 Venezuelan Su-30 fighters flew in a tight V formation. Their afterburners carved bright streaks across the sky as they pushed past Mach 1. Instead of shadowing the American fleet from above, they dove sharply, aiming directly into the projected flight corridor of the U.S. carrier strike group. Flying with the precision of pilots who had rehearsed this maneuver countless times, every wing tilt pulled them closer to the invisible air lane that the USS George Washington would naturally pass through. They inserted themselves into the path of the U.S. group in a way that looked partly like a test, partly like a threat, and partly like a trap. On the 3D radar screen inside the Combat Information Center CIC, 3 targets flashed in yellow, indicators of possible interceptors. Within 20 seconds, the system pulled in more data. Altitude 2,000 feet, speed over 480 knots. Heading directly for an intercept. Pilots were rushed into position. Flight deck crews snapped into readiness. Even though a carrier strike group is designed to withstand extreme pressure, an aerial interception within a 12 nautical mile envelope is never considered routine at that distance. High-speed fighters have almost no reaction time. A massive warship like a carrier cannot whip its rudder, cannot break formation, and a carrier strike group cannot alter its flight corridor simply because another nation attempts intimidation. That is why tensions surged so quickly. The Venezuelan Su-30s were locking onto the carrier's path using a cut-angle approach, a method NATO defines as an attack geometry angle. Immediately, a Level 3 alert blared across the ship. Red lights pulsed through the steel corridors of the USS George Washington. Up on the flight deck, sailors began securing equipment, fastening helmets, ready for any command. A giant carrier group cannot maneuver fast. Even a minor course change requires kilometers of water. And those 3 small fighters knew this. They were exploiting the carrier's mechanical weakness. It cannot dodge. During these first few minutes, the situation wasn't about missiles, radar, or bombs. It was about angles, speed, and willpower. Venezuela had chosen to walk onto the stage first, and they stepped in the strongest way possible, using military aviation to force a U.S. carrier to change course. In standard aerial intercepts, a pilot only needs to maintain a safe altitude, fly parallel to the opposing formation, and keep a steady speed to avoid misunderstandings. But what the 3 Venezuelan Su-30 Mk2s were doing was entirely different. They weren't flying high. They weren't staying outside the carrier's wake turbulence corridor. And most importantly, they were deliberately placing themselves into the kind of tactical cutoff angle any air combat expert would recognize within the first 3 seconds. From the USS George Washington's command bridge, officers could see it plainly. Every time the Su-30s adjusted their angle, they tightened the interception path, squeezing the U.S. fleet air corridor as if erecting an invisible wall of steel in the sky. At 15 nautical miles, a skilled pilot would normally break formation, but these 3 flankers didn't. They held their V-shape, banked slightly right, and simultaneously dropped to 5,700 feet, creating a direct cutoff line into the projected launch path of American aircraft if the carrier decided to launch jets within the next few minutes. No one believed this was surveillance. No one believed this was a patrol. No one believed this was a technical mistake. Everyone understood Venezuela was trying to force the U.S. to change course, a move with enormous political value. Because if the U.S. carrier shifted even 1 to 2 degrees off its intended track, Venezuela could claim that this airspace was their security zone, that the U.S. adjusted under pressure, and Caracas had the right to manage the airspace around waters they claimed. In maritime politics, a 1-degree course correction is equivalent to a strategic concession, and Venezuela was playing exactly that game, forcing a superpower through speed and positioning, not through weapons. Inside the USS Gravely's Combat Information Center, the analysis officer made a short, cold conclusion: they're forming attack geometry. Not because they were about to fire, but because they wanted the U.S. to believe they could fire at any moment, pressuring Washington into adjusting its flight path. But they miscalculated one thing. A U.S. aircraft carrier never changes course for anyone. The distance between the 3 Su-30 Mk2s and the carrier strike group had now dropped below 10 nautical miles, a threshold every U.S. officer classifies as a maximum tactical risk zone. In aerial combat, 10 nautical miles is only a few dozen seconds of flight time. In fleet doctrine, 10 nautical miles is the line where an opponent can impose position if the U.S. doesn't act first. And the U.S. did act with a cold steadiness that was almost chilling. USS Gravely increased turbine output and changed course. From its escort position off the carrier's starboard side, USS Gravely DDG-107 began to accelerate. The turbines groaned like stretched steel. The destroyer leaned slightly to the right, then performed a wide yet razor-precise arc turn, deviating only a few degrees, but enough to jump directly into the projected cutoff line of the 3 Su-30s, not charging forward, not blocking head-on, but seizing tactical position. In mixed air-sea confrontations, position is authority. Every pilot knows an unwritten rule: whoever takes the angle first controls the fight. Gravely did exactly that. Smooth, cold, without a single wasted motion. MH-60R Seahawk spins up, the first signal the U.S. sends into the sky. As soon as Gravely began its course adjustment, the MH-60R Seahawk was ordered to prepare for launch. In under 30 seconds, the Navy helicopter equipped with the APS-153 multi-mode radar lifted off the deck, its rotor tearing through the early morning sea air, then circled above Gravely like a watching shadow. In modern warfare, a Seahawk is not just a helicopter. It is the fleet's high-altitude eyes, a multi-spectrum target identification system, the first layer of soft deterrence, and a message: we see you. We are recording. Do not try it. Naval Air Systems Command has stated this openly in public reports. Visibility is deterrence. Clear presence is deterrence. And that is exactly what the U.S. was doing, standing firm, refusing to yield, showing Venezuela that they could not impose position. The U.S. had entered positional dominance mode, while the Su-30s kept pushing forward like 3 steel-tipped spears. The position of Gravely, combined with the Seahawks' circling pattern, was forming a soft pincer. No attacks, no target locks. But it pushed the pressure back onto the three flankers. And from that moment on, the battle was no longer about speed. It had become a battle for position, for initiative, for airspace authority. As the three Su-30 Mk2s continued descending to 300 feet and reduced speed from Mach 1.2 to Mach 0.92, one thing became unmistakably clear to every officer aboard USS Gravely. Venezuela was pushing deep into what Americans call the tactical clarity zone. The zone where every movement, no matter how small, reveals true intent. But it was also inside this zone that the U.S. Navy began responding with a special kind of language, the language of steel and sensors. No words, no target locks, just letting the opponent see. On the bow of USS Gravely, the 5-inch Mark 45 Mod 4, usually pointed straight forward, began to rotate slightly northwest, directly toward the path of the descending Su-30s. It didn't lock. It didn't snap. It didn't activate its fire control radar. But the subtle rotation alone was enough to catch every Venezuelan pilot's attention. In naval operations, the direction of a gun barrel is its own language. When the 5-inch begins pointing at you, it means we see you and we are shifting into readiness. A silent warning, but razor sharp, toward the aft deck. The Phalanx CIWS system, with its ultra-sensitive K-band radar, quietly rotated its white turret, its electronic eye facing the Su-30's approach angle. It did not emit a strong active radar pulse, did not paint the aircraft, did not do anything that could be labeled hostile. But the truth was this: it had begun tracking every pixel of movement. A CIWS in passive track mode prevents Venezuela from accusing the U.S. of escalation, yet forces the pilots to reconsider every bank angle, every throttle push, every vector deviation, because any of it could be interpreted as attack preparation. Atop the superstructure, the SPY-1 radar of the Aegis system continued operating at reduced output, not illuminating the Su-30s, not creating a cockpit spike tone, not sounding like a provocation. This is where the U.S. excels enough awareness to know everything, but not enough to be blamed for escalation. Officers have a name for this posture: eyes open. Weapons sheathed, eyes open. But the blade still in the scabbard. In the sky above, the MH-60R Seahawk tightened its large orbit around Gravely, forming a visible close-range air shield the Su-30s couldn't ignore. The rotor churned the morning sea air. The helicopter banked slightly, holding a carefully calculated distance 3,000 to 3,500 feet below the flanker's flight path. Tactically, the Seahawk was a reminder: one wrong move from you and the entire Aegis suite will fully open its eyes. As the three Su-30 Mk2s descended to 3,800 feet, everything shifted into a level where nothing could be misinterpreted. This was no longer a tactical encounter. It was a test of will that could escalate at any moment. At roughly Mach 0.9, with their attack angle unchanged, like a blade slicing straight into the carrier's air corridor, they had pushed the U.S. into a point where every decision became a test of national competence for both sides. On the SPY-1 radar display, the three Su-30s appeared as three glowing spears, vectors steady, the pull of their AL-31F engines carving the sky. Officers aboard USS Gravely reported continuously: bogies maintaining angle, speed unchanged, descent continues. And that was the moment the American strike group entered what analysts call the gray 4 nautical mile envelope, the 4-number gray zone. Any military aircraft entering this distance at high speed risks triggering an aerial collision, an identification failure, or an automatic defensive response from the U.S. In modern history, Several serious incidents have unfolded under these exact conditions, and the Su-30 pilots knew that perfectly well. From the carrier's bridge, time seemed to slow. The internal announcement system blared a warning air contact closing. High-speed vector. Brace for potential intercept. Officers gripped their binoculars, recording every detail: wing bank angle, aerodynamic vibration, the shimmering exhaust plume from the Su-30 engines. Deck crews secured safety harnesses. Every battle station was fully manned. From the U.S. Navy's perspective, this was the standard moment for foreign aircraft to slow down, widen formation, or respond via radio. But the three Su-30s did none of that. They held their spearhead formation, held their high speed, and continued descending as if trying to force the U.S. to act first. In that moment, the Seahawk above adjusted its observation angle, its electro-optical infrared cameras capturing every second. SPY-1 shifted into detailed vector analysis mode. The CIWS entered passive active readiness, capable of firing within a single command. And there was a cold truth the Venezuelan pilots might not have considered. At 4 nautical miles, an approaching aircraft is only 12 to 15 seconds away from triggering a mandatory U.S. hard response, and the clock was counting down with every heartbeat. The distance between the three Su-30 Mk2s and the airspace controlled by the carrier strike group was now just 3.9 nautical miles. This was no longer a distance for observation or tactical monitoring. At 3,500 to 3,800 feet and nearly Mach 0.9, a single wrong input, an unexpected burst of aerodynamic vibration, or a mistaken cockpit command could trigger an unintended collision, and with it, an immediate diplomatic crisis. In that moment, the United States Navy decided to issue an official warning, not through force, but through the formal language of international aviation law. From USS Gravely, a transmission went out on an open-frequency, unidentified Venezuelan aircraft. This is United States Navy warship operating in international airspace. Maintain safe separation immediately. The phrasing was carefully crafted, not threatening, not provocative, but absolutely firm. The volume was moderate, the tone icy. Every commercial vessel in the area heard it. Every coastal radar station logged it. This was not just a warning. It was a public declaration of position, affirming that the U.S. was operating in international airspace and that Venezuela had no authority to coerce. No reply. No formation change. No altitude adjustment. Only silence. The kind of silence veteran pilots understand perfectly. Dialogue means acknowledging U.S. legal correctness. Silence is a weapon. Silence is a statement. Silence is Venezuela signaling they were willing to keep pressing the angle. Then something occurred that the entire crew on Gravely took note of. Su-30 No. 1 activated a signal flag light on its left wing, a rare gesture in military protocol. Under the rising sun, the illuminated flag symbol was unmistakable, asserting a defense identification zone. Venezuela's symbolic way of claiming authority to demand foreign aircraft alter course. They didn't say it over the radio. They didn't provoke directly. They used exactly what makes confrontations like this asymmetric symbolic language. This tactic is often used to avoid being recorded, avoid creating political evidence, yet still transmit a challenge. USS George Washington continued straight along its designated corridor. The Su-30s maintained their cutting vector. The sky sank into a silence stretched tight as a drawn bowstring. A battle of wills in which no shots had been fired. But the weight of the moment was no less heavy than real ammunition. In high-risk aerial confrontations, the smallest detail can reverse the entire trajectory of events. And at the exact moment, the three Su-30 Mk2s were only 3.7 nautical miles from the extended defensive perimeter of USS George Washington. The radar aboard USS Gravely detected the first significant change. The signal appeared clearly on the AN Spy-1 display. Speed drop detected. Su-30 flight reducing from Mach 0.90 to Mach 0.78. A number that might seem ordinary, but in the language of air combat, it is the first step of active de-escalation. Pilots never reduce speed in a crossing zone unless they want to maintain a safer separation, or they want to shift from an aggressive cutoff posture to passive observation. With the Su-30 Mk2, a heavy thrust-dominant fighter, this was even more meaningful. Holding Mach 0.9 gave them full initiative in any close approach maneuver. But when they dropped to Mach 0.78, the U.S. immediately understood the Venezuelan pilots were reassessing the risk. And they had realized one thing. The U.S. carrier was not changing course, not reducing speed, not conceding anything. The MH-60R Seahawk's EOIR camera captured it up close. The noses of aircraft number 2 and number 3 began drifting slightly off the original cutoff line. Not much, not dramatically, just a few degrees. But for any tactical officer, it was the equivalent of a long exhale after minutes of held breath. The CIC officer aboard Gravely remarked, "Formation softening. They're reassessing." Within 20 seconds, the Su-30 vector line no longer pressed against the projected U.S. flight path, but shifted slightly leftward. Thermal signatures from the AL-31F engines showed they had decreased afterburner output, transitioning into a more fuel-efficient flight mode. All of this combined into a clear picture. Venezuela was backing off, but didn't want to look like it was backing off. In U.S. Navy tactical training manuals, there is a term, blink point, the moment when both sides are challenging each other and one side finally has to blink first to avoid disaster. And here, the side that blinked was Venezuela. No radio call, no warning, no official message, just a reduction in speed, a loosening of formation, and a shifted vector. But that was all the confirmation the U.S. needed. The other side had begun to de-escalate. As the Su-30 Mk2 formation reduced speed from Mach 0.78 to Mach 0.7, the entire space around the carrier strike group seemed to shift in tone. The pressure in the air eased by one notch, yet the tension remained fully intact, like a steel cable still pulled tight, only no longer vibrating. And then, within less than 15 seconds, USS Gravely's radar detected the next shift. The shift every analyst recognizes as the opponent is beginning to exit the engagement. The MH-60R Seahawk's camera captured it clearly. The lead Su-30 gently banked left by roughly 8 degrees, pulling the two trailing aircraft with it. This wasn't a hard break, not an evasive maneuver, and certainly not a sudden afterburner burst to escape the area. It was a deliberate, calculated course change designed to avoid admitting defeat, avoid looking like a retreat, yet still move away from the U.S. flight corridor. The Americans have a phrase that describes this with perfect accuracy: controlled disengagement. From Gravely's deck, the tactical officer confirmed. Lead Su-30, shifting vector. Formation, bending southeast. The most striking part of the encounter wasn't that Venezuela began to de-escalate. It was that the U.S. didn't alter a single parameter. USS George Washington continued at 20 knots on the exact heading, in the exact slipstream corridor, as if no Su-30 had ever dived toward them. No confrontation had ever occurred. No nation had tried to force them to yield airspace control. This is the art of superpower composure, not winning by explosions, but winning by not moving. From above, the flight path of the three flankers formed a softening arc. initially cutting across the U.S. road, then curving gently east-southeast and finally running parallel, but far enough away to pose no threat. At Mach 0.7, the Su-30s left long, pale contrails, soft, stretched, and entirely unlike the aggression of earlier. A subtle shift, but impossible to hide from U.S. radar. There was no dive, no gunfire, no dramatic cinematic moment, only a strategic truth. Venezuela changed course. Venezuela reduced speed. Venezuela opened formation. Venezuela abandoned the cutoff vector, and the U.S. did not move a single millimeter. That's why analysts call this type of victory dominance without violence. Control achieved without firing a shot. As the three Su-30 Mk2s began sliding east-southeast, the curved traces on the SPY-1 radar gradually widened. Their speed continued to fall. Mach 0.65, then Mach 0.58, a threshold that signaled they had fully abandoned any intent to pressure, cut off, or test reactions. At 4,500 feet, the formation that once looked sharp as a blade now appeared loose, like a hand slowly letting go. The Seahawk's FLIR camera captured aircraft number 1 gently climbing to 6,000 feet, then banking a few more degrees to the right, distancing itself from the turbulent airflow generated by the carrier strike group. The other two followed, but each chose a slightly different separation angle, marking the complete dissolution of the V-shaped tactical formation. The radar controller aboard Gravely reported, "Venezuelan flight exiting intercept vector. No re-engagement signs." This report confirmed more than a technical change. It confirmed a strategic defeat. While the Su-30 Mk2s disengaged, the Seahawk continued circling above Gravely, maintaining a textbook surveillance distance. Its cameras recorded every second until the three flankers shrank into faint glowing specks, fading along the horizon. Everything was documented, an irrefutable record that the U.S. never changed course, never reduced speed, never ceded its lawful flight path, and that Venezuela was the side that chose to leave first. No missiles fired, no systems forced into hard lock, no U.S. fighters launched from the deck. Yet the outcome was clearer than any armed engagement. Whoever maintains their course wins. Whoever withdraws first loses. And in this confrontation, the answer was indisputable. As the final contrails of the three Su-30 Mk2 flankers faded along the edge of the horizon, the Caribbean Sea returned to its natural calm. But for anyone who witnessed the encounter, whether from the deck, the radar room, or the MH-60R Seahawk overhead, this calm was not accidental. It was the result of a contest of will, where only one side held its line until the very end. And that side was the United States Navy. The three Su-30 approached, descended, maintained attack speed, and deliberately carved a sharp intercept line meant to force the U.S. to change course. They used psychological tactics, symbolism, and even silence to apply pressure. But instead of responding with weapons or escalation, the U.S. reacted with a calm forged through decades of command over the oceans. USS Gravely moved like a cold blade, seizing tactical position without a single aggressive gesture. The MH-60R Seahawk launched not to challenge, but to observe every detail. U.S. weapon systems rotated, angled, and awoke without ever drawing a sword. And most importantly, USS George Washington did not deviate by even 1 degree from its international flight path. At the strategic level, that meant more than any fighter scramble ever could. Analysts call this a form of victory known as deterrence posture. Deterrence through stance. It rests on three pillars: absolute discipline in course and speed. The fleet does not alter parameters even under provocation. The ability to control surrounding space without firing, using only position, sensors, and consistent presence. Superpower psychology, neither overreacting nor conceding. The U.S. holds initiative through composure alone. Venezuela tried to pressure. Venezuela tried to test, but they were the ones who had to loosen formation, slow down, change course, and leave, while the U.S. continued forward as if the episode were nothing more than a breeze passing across the bow. If you were standing on the bridge of USS George Washington at 4:17 a.m. that morning, watching three Su-30 Mk2s dive straight down from the sky, the distance closing every second, radio silence, the opposing formation sharpening its angle again and again, would you have held the exact same course as the United States Navy did? Or would you have turned even by a single degree?